Everyone knows the big boy. It is the largest, the heaviest, the most celebrated steam locomotive in history. Everyone who follows railroading knows the Pennsylvania Railroad's T1, the fastest and most controversial American steam design, now the subject of a $30 million reconstruction effort. But almost nobody knows about the locomotive that outperformed both of them on the metric that actually mattered. The Pennsylvania Railroad's Q2 was the most powerful non-articulated steam locomotive ever built. Its tested horsepower exceeded 7,900, a figure that surpassed Big Boy, surpassed the Allegheny, and surpassed every other steam locomotive ever measured on an American test plant. 26 were built. Not one survived. There is no Q2 in any museum. There is no Q2 behind any rope. There is no Q2 rebuild project, no foundation, no fundraising campaign. The most powerful rigid-frame locomotive in history has been erased twice, once by the scrapper's torch, and again by the shadow of its own more famous, more dramatic, and more deeply flawed sibling. If the Q2 was this powerful, this successful, and this important, how could it vanish so completely that even the people trying to rebuild the T1 barely mention it? The answer reveals something uncomfortable about how we choose our heroes. We do not remember what worked best. We remember what failed most spectacularly. The Pennsylvania Railroad did not build locomotives the way other railroads did. Most American carriers placed orders with outside manufacturers, Baldwin, Alco, Lima, choosing from catalogs of proven designs or requesting custom variations on established themes. The PRR designed its own. The Juniata shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania, constituted one of the largest and most sophisticated locomotive manufacturing facilities in the world. Thousands of workers, from pattern makers and foundry men to machinists and boiler makers, occupied a complex that stretched across dozens of buildings and could produce a complete locomotive from raw materials to finished product without relying on a single outside supplier. This self-sufficiency was not merely a matter of pride. It was a strategic philosophy rooted in the PRR's conviction that it understood its own operating requirements better than any commercial builder. The railroad's main line between New York and Chicago traversed the Allegheny Mountains, a barrier that demanded specialized motive power. The grades west of Altoona, including the famous Horseshoe Curve and the climb to Galitzin Summit, were among the most punishing on any main line in the eastern United States. Passenger trains needed speed. Freight trains needed power, and the PRR's engineering department, headquartered within the Juniata complex itself, designed machines for both with an intensity that bordered on obsession. By the early 1940s, the PRR was pursuing two parallel locomotive programs that would define the final chapter of American steam. The first was the T1, the 4444 Duplex passenger locomotive that would become both the fastest and the most troubled steam engine in American history. The second, conceived simultaneously and built from the same engineering philosophy, was the Q2, the freight counterpart that would deliver the same duplex advantages in a heavier, slower, and far more demanding application. The passenger locomotive got the headlines, the freight locomotive got the work done, and history, as it so often does, remembered the drama and forgot the substance. The duplex drive concept was the PRR's answer to a problem that haunted locomotive designers for decades. As steam locomotives grew more powerful, their reciprocating parts, the pistons, rods, and crossheads that converted steam pressure into rotary motion, grew heavier. At speed, these heavy parts hammered up and down with enormous force, creating a phenomenon called hammer blow. This rhythmic pounding damaged track, stressed bearings, and placed strict limits on how fast and how powerfully a conventional locomotive could operate before the punishment became unsustainable. The articulated locomotive, as perfected by Union Pacific's Big Boy, solved this problem by splitting the engine into two hinge sets that could pivot independently. But articulation introduced its own complexities. The hinged joint was a maintenance headache. The long, flexible frame made precise alignment difficult, and the divided running gear imposed limits on the locomotive's stability at higher speeds. The PRR's engineers, under Chief Mechanical Officer Ralph P. Johnson, proposed a different solution. Instead of bending the locomotive in the middle, they would place two independent engine sets on a single rigid frame. Each set would have its own cylinders and driving wheels, but the frame would not hinge. The the locomotive would be shorter, stiffer, and more stable than an articulated of comparable power. This was the duplex principle. Two engine sets, one rigid frame, half the reciprocating mass per engine set compared to a conventional locomotive of equivalent power, less hammer blow, higher safe speeds, and in the case of the freight version, more tractive effort per ton of locomotive weight than any articulated design could deliver from a single boiler. The Q2 prototype, number 6175, emerged from the Juniata shops in June 1944. The locomotive was enormous for the standards of rigid frame engines. Its wheel arrangement, classified as 4464, placed 4 pilot wheels up front, followed by a set of 4 driving wheels driven by one pair of cylinders, then a set of 6 driving wheels driven by a second pair of cylinders, and finally 4 trailing wheels supporting the firebox. The total engine weight reached approximately 619,000 pounds. With tender, the locomotive approached 1 million pounds. It was the heaviest non-articulated steam locomotive ever constructed. The specifications read like a catalog of superlatives within the rigid frame category. 4 cylinders, arranged in 2 pairs, converted steam to motion. The forward pair measured 19.78 inches in diameter with a 28-inch stroke. The rear pair, driving the 6 coupled wheels that bore the heaviest loads, measured 23.75 inches in diameter with a 29-inch stroke. The asymmetry was deliberate. The larger rear cylinders and 6-wheel arrangement placed the greatest power and adhesion where it was needed most, at the back of the engine where weight pressed down hardest on the rails. Boiler pressure was rated at 300 pounds per square inch, the same figure used by the T1 and by Big Boy. The firebox sprawled across 121 square feet of grate area, larger than the T1's 92 square feet, reflecting the Q2's need for sustained high output under the relentless demands of heavy freight. Driving wheels measured 69 inches in diameter, considerably smaller than the T1's 80-inch passenger wheels, but ideally sized for the speed range of mainline freight. The smaller drivers gave the Q2 higher tractive effort at the expense of top speed, a trade that made perfect sense for a locomotive that would spend its life hauling 5,000-ton freight over mountain grades rather than sprinting between cities at 100 miles per hour. Starting tractive effort was rated at 100,816 pounds, a figure that placed the Q2 in direct competition with the mightiest articulated locomotives in the country, including Big Boy's 135,375 pounds and the Allegheny's 110,200 to 128,700 pounds. The difference was that the Q2 achieved this from a rigid frame, no articulation joint, no hinged connection, no flexible steam pipe between engine sets. The entire locomotive was a single, stiff structural unit, simpler to maintain, more stable at speed, and easier to keep in alignment than any comparable articulated. The PRR's engineers believed this rigidity was an advantage, and the test results would prove them right. In the autumn of 1944, the Q2 prototype was sent to the Pennsylvania Railroad's test plant for dynamometer evaluation. The test plant, one of the most sophisticated locomotive evaluation facilities in the world, used calibrated rollers and instrumentation to measure every aspect of a locomotive's performance under controlled conditions: steam pressure, cylinder pressure, drawbar pull, speed, fuel consumption, water rate. All were recorded on continuous charts with instruments that left no room for estimation or guesswork. What the instruments recorded over the following weeks stunned even the engineers who had designed the locomotive. At 57 miles per hour, the Q2 produced 7,987 indicated horsepower. This was not drawbar horsepower, the figure measured at the coupler after subtracting the locomotive's own rolling resistance. It was indicated horsepower, calculated from the pressure and displacement in the cylinders themselves. But even after accounting for mechanical losses, which typically consumed 10 to 15% of indicated horsepower, the Q2's drawbar output exceeded 6,800 horsepower, a figure that placed it among the 3 or 4 most powerful steam locomotives ever tested in any country. The numbers demanded context. Big Boy, the legendary Titan, produced approximately 6,290 drawbar horsepower in its best recorded test. The Allegheny, the Chesapeake and Ohio's mountain conqueror, reached 7,498 drawbar horsepower at its peak.
The Q2's indicated horsepower of 7,987 suggested a drawbar figure that rivaled or exceeded both, depending on the assumptions used for mechanical efficiency. And the Q2 achieved this from a locomotive that weighed roughly 619,000 pounds, compared to Big Boy's 540,000 pounds on drivings. The Q2 was heavier, but it was not articulated. Every pound of that weight was carried on a single rigid frame, a feat of structural engineering that no other builder had matched. The tractive effort comparison added another dimension. At starting speeds, the Q2's 100,816 pounds of tractive effort fell short of Big Boy's 135,375 pounds. But Big Boy's enormous figure was distributed across 2 articulated engine sets with 16 driving wheels. The Q2's force was delivered through 10 driving wheels on a rigid frame. Pound for pound, wheel for wheel, the Q2 applied more force per driving wheel than any other locomotive in America. On the railhead, where adhesion was the difference between traction and slippage,